Well, you mentioned when we were talking about the ASX, you mentioned, oh well, unless it's the Pilbara and Novo, then it gets no attention. Well, let's talk about that then, because I feel I'm going to have zero views unless this is about Novo or GGI, and obviously unless we are talking up those two plays, then we're the enemy. But disclaimer: I am long GGI, and as a consequence, I'm like 50% down, which is what I do.
Oh,
But let's talk about Novo. So for somebody who's just landed on planet Earth, and is looking at this NVO's, ticker symbol, how would you even explain what is going on there? Because for a long time, I think it's come down a bit now, but for a long time, this was $1 billion um, company that didn't have much of anything to back that up, but a theory. And the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come in. Not all of them line up as the original theory, but it's still very early days. What is the explanation for Novo?
well, I got sucked into the Novo story this summer, and it's the blue sky potential. This could be the greatest gold discovery in the history of the world, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That has appeal. Like when something is so off the charts where you can't even really quantify it, and people were running the most ridiculous numbers, like and there's the right hype behind it. You have Eric Sprott, Kirkland Lake Gold. I think for me, that's actually what did it for me. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I first saw, those YouTube videos with the Fossicers and the metal detectors, all that, like I thought it was interesting, but I didn't know enough about the story, and you just try to compare it to other gold companies on a relative basis. Though in this case, it's kind of more an anomaly than anything. And I just couldn't. At the time, I think it was only like a $200-300 million market cap, and I couldn't figure it out. So I kind of just put it on the back burner. But as soon as I saw the whole Kirkland Lake deal for 56 million,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what really did it for me. Not to mention all the other hype surrounding it, but I thought this was kind of a concrete validation that this is very real,
Mm-hmm.
because like a company like Kirkland, um, that's probably one of the best mid-tier gold producers around, and for them to step up to the plate to that magnitude of scale, to write a stiff check like that, I
Mm-hmm.
started paying attention. I try to ignore a lot of the hype that surrounds it, in the sense where it is easy to kind of get sucked into the story when people are talking about billions of ounces. I mean, that's so far off the scale, it doesn't even register anymore. Um, but for me, it's all that. But when you look at what they're finding at Purdy's Reward and Comet Wells, it's real gold. So it's actually there. It's not so much of the speculation part where you think it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's proven it's there. It's at surface. It daylights. It's all over the place. And right now, the biggest question mark is grade, and whether that's going to justify the economics of this. But it's very simple to process. Outstanding recoveries, very straightforward. It's now when you try to tie it to the original wits in Africa, and then that's when all the geologists kind of chime in and put in their 2 cents, and that's not. I mean, that stuff that could be a never-ending debate, so you can get caught in all that. But for me, I guess the conviction to get in was when I looked at risk versus reward. It's obviously extremely high risk because it's so unproven and early stage. But I guess in my experience, just 2 years in the mining space, I've never seen a proposition from the reward side
Mm-hmm.
as outstretched as Novo. So I thought it made sense. I got a comment a while back from somebody, and it basically said, just treat it like a lottery ticket. You don't have to bet the farm on it or anything like that, but this is probably one of those stories where you just want to have a little bit in the game, just in case it does turn out to be something even remotely close to that out of this world blue sky potential, that it could still be worthwhile. So that's just kind of how I took it. I did get a little too sucked in with they call it the Pilbara Sisters, and those are all the surrounding companies that are trying to stake claims and land in the Pilbara, and they're trying to get in on the story as well. That was more for as a quick trade. I didn't want to ever get too carried away and sucked in, because that's kind of that's what's working on the ASX right now. Or sorry, not the ASX, but mining in general. But a lot of these plays are listed on the ASX, and that's where you have to be careful, because I started chasing a lot of these plays just to try to make a quick buck, and a lot of these companies have kind of round tripped, and they've given up all the gains. It's just very volatile sector, but that's why I have a small position in Novo, is just for that, in case this does kind of work out, kind of thing.
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting into it. And I know I've asked Nick for his opinion, so Nick, you're up next. But yeah, it's exactly what you said, Jay. When you think purely about, okay, if we're going to speculate, then we need to approach this from a risk reward sort of deal. And when I first heard of it, it had already run up to an extent that I was like, okay, this is not for me. I lost it. I missed it. The bus is gone. That's it. When I looked at the chart for the first time, I'm like, wow, was I hibernating? Because whichever way you look at it, like after July, August, it just ran up so much. Speaking of Novo itself. And then you look at the market cap to see, like, is this the share count right? Am I seeing things right? And yes, it really is that big. But it really is all or nothing, in the sense that if they are right, then I believe that, this is an easy 10 bagger from here even. But if they're wrong, then I have to be willing to lose the money that I put in. And so I've been umming and ahhing, especially because I haven't decided yet if I should risk a little bit into Novo or start with Kirkland Lake. I always get that name wrong. I say Kirk Lake something. KL. That's easier. So I don't know if I start with KL, if I buy NVO, or if I start with the little Pilbara Sisters that are comparatively, I think, and just down. Like this week or last week I should say, they took a beating. And I'm just like, okay, so if I'm going to try this, should I actually go for the real thing? How should I split my speculation? And that's been keeping me from investing, which is good because the price is coming down. And so, like it's more and more attractive by the day. And yeah, it's just crazy. Part of me kind of wishes that this is real and that it is as good as, the wildest calculations, because, I mean, how cool would it be, for us to discover just this, I don't know, billion ounce discovery in Australia. But at the same time, my thinking is, okay, so we psychologically, which is the only thing I really understand about the market, like no geology background whatsoever, but I try to find out what people are thinking, where they're going. So in 2016, we had, the beginning of a bull market in, you could say, throughout the whole gold sector. And then that sort of died down. And I feel that people were just fed up. They were waiting for this bull market to begin, and we're like excited and doubling our money and tripling, etc. And then all of a sudden it kind of dies out and people are bored. And here comes Novo out of the blue, and it explodes to the upside. And so part of me is wondering, are we just really wishing for this story to redeem the market just because we are bored with how the rest of the market is performing right now. And where was Novo a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? How would people in Western Australia not trip over those gold nuggets is kind of what I always wonder. But I don't know. I don't know enough about the play. All I know is, I hope it works out well for the betterment of the industry as a whole. Nick.
Well, I've kind of bit my tongue for a while. Part of the reason I think I've been lurking is that so many other people have so many things to say about these. I mean, it is incredible how CEO.ca has changed. You get more people in the Novo room on its own or the Garibaldi room on its own than you have in the index. Like, I think that's incredible. For anyone who's aware of CEO.ca, that was
Yeah.
just absolutely unheard of a year ago. Like, no way that could ever happen. And so, yeah, you have a couple of these plays that have taken so much attention. I definitely have some not so nice things to say. So I'll try to not be like over the top because I don't want to kind of hurt myself or have too much backlash. But I'll have
Go
some
for
interesting
it.
things to say. But I will start with some nice things. Like I definitely want to give a couple shout outs to some CEO.ca buddies. I actually think Stateside deserves a lot of credit. Like he was totally on the Pilbara sisters right away. Like he was on it before all the Aussies, and he's kind of cynical or kind of like constantly making jokes. But he's right. Like the Australians were so slow to at least pick up on the momentum, and he was making the first messages on so many of those Pilbara sisters. So I have to give him a lot of credit. Like regardless of how this turns out, I know he's made money and like he's added a ton of value just doing like very independent thinker doing his own research, and I love that. And then my other buddy H Horseman, which Jay probably talks to even more than I do. I think it's so cool that he's gotten shout outs from Bob Moriarty, who's kind of like the Novo godfather. At least that's the way it
Mm-hmm.
seems. He's like been on it forever. And I mean, it shows how you can get that instant credibility because I think Horseman is very similar to us, kind of came out of nowhere and has done awesome independent research. Honestly, I haven't paid for his write-ups, which I believe are super valuable. Everyone has said they are because I'm personally not that interested in all this Pilbara stuff. But I think it's great that like this has kind of been a launching pad for him, and I hope he does a lot more. And really, I hope in a lot of ways this works out. But I do have a beef with a lot of various things, and I'll try to go through that relatively briefly right now. I think it really does bug me that this all seemed to come out of a freaking YouTube video. And it wasn't even, I didn't think it was a very good YouTube video. I thought it was really stupid. I thought it was really stupid. That's metal
Oh, you
detectors
are gonna get
beeping.
called out.
Yeah. Oh, it's just metal detectors beeping. Like, and this thing flies up 5 times. And I know on record, I think this is where I give Bob Moriarty credit. Like he says he's been talking about this for years and that a lot of this stuff was already known. So why does the market pay attention because of a stupid YouTube video? And I think there's other people who agree, but then they took it to another level and did this like crazy hype thing at the Denver Gold Forum. Now, I think it is brilliant marketing, but from my understanding, there's a lot of things that are very gray area, very borderline in terms of regulations, and I don't want to see all these other companies coming out with metal detectors and making YouTube videos to make their stocks go up 2 or 3 times. Like there's something to be said, about the whole truth machine thing, like actually drilling and getting results. On the flip side of that, you could definitely say, okay, this is interesting because there is so much mystery and this is so different. And I don't want to take credit away from Quentin Henney, like basically the lead geologist. I mean, there's something real. It's just that I don't like the way that it's kind of moved forward. Like, is this what you have to do to get people interested in your stock? And to Fabi's point, I don't think this could have happened a year or two ago. I think the timing was just perfect. But I'm very, very skeptical about the value creation from a YouTube video. Like that's what it feels like. It really, to me, it feels that way. And it also bugs me a ton that seems like every single newsletter is on this. I hate seeing that. Like I don't like seeing all the newsletters crowding in, and I don't want to take away from excellent content from some of them. But I will say, like, and I'm not the only one to say this. When I hear people like John Kaiser saying, what do you say, like hundreds of millions or billions of
Billions,
golden
yeah.
ground, I've heard him say it. Like, I don't like that. And I actually respect some of the things John Kaiser has said, but that has not added value. Like, that's hype. That's crazy hype. And now there's all like the WITS 2.0 thing got thrown around, and there are some naysayers. Like there are definitely some smart people who don't believe in this, and they push a little too far in the negative side. But what's happened, we've had all these ridiculous extremes of positive and negative. And again, I don't like that as a culture, for this industry, even if this works out. So you can tell I'm not a fan of like the way this has moved forward, but it could work out. I think it's really fascinating. It's totally not for me, but I do have to add one more point where I think not enough people have called this out. And again, I shouldn't go too negative, but I'm very skeptical in general of Eric Sprott as someone to look up to as like some great indicator of big money and excellent judgment. You cannot take away from Eric Sprott, basically becoming a billionaire through lots of excellent picks. But people it's so easy for them to forget that he had some calls that totally didn't work out during the bear market. And I did find an article that basically said like he lost a ton of credibility within Sprott. And it's kind of odd because my broker is Sprott Global, but when I think of my broker, I don't think of Eric Sprott. I think of Rick Rule, and they're kind of separated. Like Eric Sprott is not even really part of Sprott anymore, even though people think he is.
That's true.
Everything that's getting bought I think is directly related to Eric Sprott. I think he's a huge shareholder in Kirkland Gold. He's been a big buyer in Novo on his own, and he's been a big buyer in Garibaldi on its own. So I'm not saying he's a bad person who's something not to follow, but he is a lot of notches below some of the higher level, great minds or people I think about. Like we can only go with public information. Like I don't know these people personally, but I would put Rick Rule's judgment, ahead of Eric Sprott's, even though Rick Rule works for Sprott. Has Rick Rule bought in any of this? I don't think he has. Also, like someone like Ross Beatty, when I see his writings, like he's made some mistakes too, but like that's just another example of someone where like when he buys something, I personally pay more attention to it. But I find it very odd that Eric Sprott's the only person that's like really involved with all of these at a big money level. I just think it's a really important point because not a single other person, which really surprised me, not a single other person has brought up Eric Sprott's track record. And you can go back and look at it, and maybe they don't want to bring it up because they don't want to get yelled at. But I'm not going to talk about this on co.ca, but I thought I would just throw it all onto Fabi's YouTube channel, and we'll see if anyone's paying attention.
It's okay. I can take all the dislikes on my videos. I'm okay with that. I'm cool.
Yeah, we've already been there, done that, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, we still need to talk about crypto. That's what get all the dislikes.